Good afternoon. My name is Luigi Antonio Irlandini, and I am going to talk about musical composition and mythical thought. In a specific piece that I composed in 2017 called Vrtrahan for baritone saxophone and percussion. In this piece, the Vedic myth of Indra slaying the cosmic dragon Vritra suggests structuring procedures, instrumental sound sources, and sound images. The discussion of some of the compositional processes in this work, as they were suggested by mythical thought, illustrates the composer's idea of composition as cosmology. The endless serpent, who for so long as he was one abundance, remained invincible, is disjointed and dismembered as a tree is felled and cut up into logs. The idea of composition as cosmology creates a new relationship between musical and mythical thought, explored also in many of my other compositions since 1988. Mythical consciousness lies buried under several layers of historical and empirical thought, which sees it as something from a primitive phase of the human being, long overcome by rational and intellectual consciousness and science. For that reason, any approach to myth has been criticized as nostalgic and naive. A connection between ancient myth and contemporary music seems like an absurdity for many people. In fact, we cannot hypothesize or presuppose ancient myth without some problematization, as if it were a form of consciousness readily alive or natural for late capitalism societies. Nevertheless, it is such a connection, music composition and ancient Indian myth, that resides at the center of my everyday life as a composer. And I feel safe in the company of these myth scholars because they support the view that, especially when there is an involvement with the arts, ancient myth is not unreachable to us. Mythical consciousness is accessible to us. And I feel also safe with these composers because they provide vibrant examples of myth-music connections. The exploration of myth in conjunction with music composition needs the attitude of not equating myth with lie. It requires recognizing that myth may not be real, but it is true. Concerning compositional practices, this exploration cannot consist in the simple borrowing of exotic narratives, providing a programmatic support to which music becomes an accessory. In my case, it is about structuring musical time that relate to images and ideas from myth and spirituality, so that the mythical image and the musical time structure and experience are integrated as a cosmology. The piece, Vrtrahan, is for a baritone, saxophone, and two percussionists, or one percussionist. The instruments are basically metal percussion and membrane percussion, and the piece is mostly for bass drum. Vrtrahan is one of the many epithets of the Vedic warrior god Indra, lightbringer, space maker, god of rain, lightning, and thunder. The word means slayer of Vritra, the cosmic dragon or serpent. Indra's deed, the slaying of the dragon, is recounted in several hymns of the Rigveda. And the myth goes like this. It's very simple. Vritra had enclosed the waters, or rain. Indra kills the dragon and releases the water, making them flow for humanity. The myth interpretation that I follow comes from these three Vedic scholars, Ananda Kumaraswamy, Janine Miller, and Antonio de Nicolas. Vritra, the dragon, stands for the asat, or non-existence, the whole unmanifested and undifferentiated primordial chaos. The slaying of the dragon is the sacrifice that creates the world of phenomena, sat, or existence. Vritra enclosed the waters, understood as primordial substance. In this quality, as he who encloses and constricts all manifestation and existence, all God's beings, the universe, he is Tad Ekan, that one, the progenitor and first principle which contains all things. The constrictor only releases existence from its embrace by means of a battle with the Dragonslayer Indra, who personifies the expanding force, not as a different principle, but as the progenitor's son, or alter ego. In the same way as within chaos lies concealed the principle of light, of order, of cosmos, of life-giving energy. The act of slaying the dragon is a continuous, ever-proceeding creative act, an eternal beginning that makes existence, Sat, emerge from non-existence, Asat. It is a continuous, daily process by which Indra modifies the primeval state of undifferentiation into a differentiated world with distinct realms, sequence, time, contrasts, light and darkness, just like music. The analogy between Indra and the composer comes automatically from the fact that both have the role of liberating manifestation. They are both expanding forces. Indra liberates the manifestations of the world of phenomena. The composer liberates the manifestations of the world of musical sounds. And I should add here, the performer does the same. This, however, is just an analogy. It does not yet create a significant bond between the myth and the music. Furthermore, Vrtrahan doesn't tell the story of Indra slaying Vritra. It is not a narrative with a beginning, middle, and end. The mythical narrative and its images are present in or invoked by the music, mostly in the circular, non-linear, and non-chronological way of the Ordre principles that structure the work's musical becoming, and are immanent in it. I'm using here Ordre because of Xenakis, who used the term entente to refer to that which changes along the musical time, and the term Ordre to everything that can be thought of as without change due to a before and an after. Thus, the notion of a programmatic music addicted to a predicament of 19th century musical aesthetics is not applicable here. The mythical images of Indra's battle with Vritra do take shape of evocative sounds recalling thunder and lightning. They also indicated the use of friction drums, lion's roar, and Brazilian cuica, because these instruments convey symbolically through their sound production technique by rubbing against a string or a flexible rod attached to the drum's skin, the creative modus operandi of sacrifice. By employing such instruments and other techniques that emphasize the rubbing aspect of sound production, such as tremoli and frullati, the work's sonorities acquire a visual, concrete connection with the more abstract aspects of the myth. But the mythical images also suggest the agonistic dynamism between sound events, a dynamism that has the nature of a fight or combat between the musical events or energies. Agonistic dynamism is how time passes in Vrtrahan. Constriction versus expansion. Indra and Vritra complement each other because the slaying of Vritra is the sacrifice of Vritra. Indra and Vritra are each the obstructor of the other. There cannot be both at once. In a manifestation, that is, within the virtual time of the musical work, the complementarity of manifesting and non-manifesting takes place in the complementarity between sound and silence, since these are, in the world of music, the elements in which presence and absence are most clearly revealed, precisely as manifestation and non-manifestation. Composing this musical agonism between Asat and Sat involved realizing two things. One, the idea that existence comes from non-existence. This suggested the need for giving special attention to the envelope of sounds particularly the way a sound exits from silence, the attack, and how it re-enters silence, the decay. With the creation of a convincing tension between these two elements, sound and silence, silences are heard as non-existence in the sense that they contain sounds. These, on their turn, break out from silences. Sound bursts out of silence. The second thing is the sounding aspect of silence, or the silent aspect of sounds. De Nicolas mentions that Assad embraces the whole spectrum of sound from its absence to its plenary confusion. Non-existence in music would not only be the absence of sound, but also something like a white noise, a sound containing all existing sonorities synchronously. This idea was withdrawn because metaphorical white noise obtained by the piece's musicians playing randomly all sounds possible in their instruments would create too active a texture that could lead to its association with the sat instead of the asat. However, the Vedic idea of inactivity or non-action, nirriti, provided a richer concept of silence. As far as inactive sounds can act, in the modality of being in the world of asat, they partake the essence of silence. Goldheuter pointed out that silence is also monotony, high level of redundancy, reverberation, sketch, non-pretension, delineation, transparency, simplicity, austerity, and meditation. All these elements contribute to a manifestation of silence as non-existence that is not just a pause or a rest, but a sound that imitates its own absence and which is therefore restricted, limited by the idea of silence. Such sounds are those which tend not to move, or that are like a false movement. In the saxophone, sustained or articulated rhythmically polarized pitches or sonorities. In the percussion, tremolando sounds on the bass, drum rolls, woodblock, cymbals, or tum-tums, and sonances, among others. Sonance is a sound that has only an attack and then only decay. The compositional process is the cosmogony of the acoustic universe of the musical work. It is the action or combined actions by which the endless serpent is disjointed and dismembered. Therefore, the first mutilating act is the first decision in the pre-composition, the decision which will begin the process of extracting musical time from its non-existence. In Vrtrahan, this first step takes the shape of the Vedic poetic meter Trishtubh as the chosen pattern of rhythmic and temporal articulation in several layers, starting with the macroform. The Trishtubh, as a rhythmic pattern, corresponds to a sequence of 11 short and long syllables, of which the first, third, and last may be either long or short. The macroformal Trishtubh in Vrtrahan is the following fixed sequence: short, long, short, long, short, short, long, short, long, short, long. As the first level of dismemberment of the serpent, the macroformal Trishtubh creates 11 musical sections, the syllables, grouped in 3 musical parts, A, B, and C. This grouping is given by the Trishtubh itself. Each of the 11 syllables of the macroformal Trishtubh are further subdivided in a second level or layer of rhythmic organization, the middle ground level, where the macroformal syllables are themselves subdivided by the Trishtubh fixed sequence shown above, sort of like a little fractal. Also, the microformal Trishtubh appears as the surface level. But it is in the middle ground level that the agonistic dynamism between Sat and Asat takes place. In this picture here, I have section A1, which corresponds to the first macroformal Trishtubh syllable. And it's a very, very simple realization of this agonism. Time's up. My presentation is finished, and may it have been a good teaser for you to be interested in reading the paper. Thank you very much for listening.